Welcome to a quiet journey through history. Tonight, we drift back to the medieval courts of France, where torchlight flickered on stone walls and silk rustled through candlelit halls. There, a king once ruled who believed he was made of fragile glass. This is the story of Charles VI, a ruler touched by madness in a world unraveling. Close your eyes, let the past unfold gently. It is the late 14th century. The wind moves softly through the forests of northern France, where the leaves of ancient oak trees whisper secrets older than the names of kings. Beneath the low gray skies of this land, villages hum with the quiet rhythm of rural life. Thatched cottages exhale smoke from hearth fires, and narrow dirt roads stretch toward walled cities resting like sleeping giants. This is a kingdom steeped in beauty, but blanketed in uncertainty. France, once mighty, now staggers beneath the weight of a long and ruinous war. For decades, it has bled in the 100 Years' conflict with England. Fields have been burned, towns sacked, and crops stolen. Tax burdens have grown unbearable. The people wait, hopeful and afraid, for the tides of war to change, for peace, for healing, for a sovereign who might restore balance. And then, a boy becomes king. Charles VI ascends to the throne in 1380. He is just 11 years old, a child surrounded by adult ambitions and the heavy silence of courtly expectation. In his youth, he is bright-eyed and fair, with soft features and a gentle demeanor. His golden coronation robes shimmer in the cathedral light, but they cannot shield him from the world he is about to inherit. France, at this time, is ruled not by the boy, but by his uncles, regents who maneuver for power behind velvet curtains. They raise taxes, divide loyalties, and feather their own nests. Still, the people wait for the king to grow, for the king to lead. By the age of 21, Charles begins to take the reins. He's crowned with ceremony, adored in song, and rides with confidence. His reign begins with promise. He dismisses his greedy uncles and surrounds himself with youthful advisors, known fondly as the Marmousets. Reform spreads. The kingdom breathes. For a moment, hope returns. But beneath the surface, something fragile stirs. Like a fine porcelain vessel placed too near the fire, cracks begin to form in the mind of the young king. They are not visible at first. Whispers, perhaps, of sudden anger, moments of confusion, fatigue, and unease no one dares name. And then, on a sunlit road in the forest of Le Mans, it shatters. In 1392, during a journey to Brittany, Charles is struck by a violent madness. He draws his sword and attacks his own men, slaying several before collapsing. His eyes are distant, his body limp. For days he does not speak. His courtiers murmur prayers, unsure of what has passed, or whether it will return. It does. And again, the king begins to lose himself. Periods of clarity become rare. He forgets his name. He forgets he is king. At times, he fails to recognize his wife or children. The court watches in quiet terror as their sovereign slips further into shadow. There is no cure. There is no understanding. Only the slow, disorienting unraveling of a once promising mind. And from this place of torment, one peculiar delusion arises, the belief that he is made of glass, not metaphorical glass, not delicate in the poetic sense, but truly, physically, glass. He insists that he will shatter if touched, that his body is brittle and hollow. He wears reinforced clothing and refuses to be touched. He avoids chairs with hard edges. Servants tiptoe around him as if navigating a crystal cathedral. This is not theater. This is not eccentricity. It is madness, real and unrelenting. And yet, he is still king. The affairs of state do not pause for fragile minds. Ambitions swirl like autumn leaves around the royal court. His wife, Queen Isabeau begins to take on the burden of rulership. But with it comes resentment and rumors. The king's uncles, once dismissed, reappear with sharper claws, and a new generation of nobles eyes the throne with quiet hunger. France, meanwhile, is drifting. Its leader no longer leads. Its laws are contested, its future uncertain. The people, wearied by war and famine, now bear a crown of confusion. They speak of their king in hushed tones, of the monarch who once ruled with promise and now wanders palace halls, fearing a single touch. As night settles over the land, the torchlight dims across the stone corridors of the Hôtel Saint-Paul, Charles's favored residence. Inside, servants lay soft carpets and move furniture aside. The king must not be hurt. He must not be broken. Glass, he says. I am made of glass. And the kingdom watches, not knowing whether to weep or wait. The mind is a vast and delicate thing. In the early 15th century, no one yet understood its silent corridors or shadowed corners. There were no names for schizophrenia, no treatments for psychosis, no gentle hands trained in neurology. Madness in this world was both feared and mystified, a divine punishment, a curse, or a ghost in the blood. And so, when Charles VI, King of France, began to believe he was made of glass, there was no way to understand what haunted him. He withdrew deeper into himself, slipping like fog through the fingers of his physicians. They bled him. They prayed over him. They offered tonics and rituals. But none could pierce the crystalline barrier between the king and his court. The belief grew stronger, the fear more rooted. Charles insisted that he must not be touched, not even lightly. He was certain his limbs would shatter, that a wrong movement might reduce him to fragments. He sat motionless for hours, walked gingerly along velvet carpets. Sometimes he demanded to be wrapped in thick garments, as if layers of wool and linen might preserve the integrity of his imagined form. This peculiar condition would later come to be known retrospectively as the glass delusion, a rare psychological state in which individuals believe they are composed of fragile material. Though Charles is its most famous case, he would not be the last. In the centuries that followed, isolated reports would surface across Europe of noblemen and scholars convinced they were glass jars, bottles, even glass-eyed birds. But in the court of France, this delusion wore a crown. The symbolism is haunting. A king, once seen as the pillar of strength, the embodiment of divine right, now imagined himself as breakable, transparent, and hollow. His condition became a quiet metaphor for the kingdom itself. France, like its king, was fractured. Though the war with England continued in fits and starts, the deeper damage was internal. Charles's mental illness had paralyzed the machinery of governance. In his long absences from reason, power shifted restlessly between factions. His wife, Queen Isabeau of Bavaria, governed in his name, but her authority was constantly undermined. The king's brother, Louis of Orléans, began to step in as well. He wielded power with a flamboyant confidence, surrounding himself with poets and mistresses, drawing both admiration and resentment. Across from him stood John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy, a man whose name alone revealed his nature. He distrusted the queen and loathed the Orléans faction. And so, beneath the surface of the king's madness, a civil war of influence was beginning to take shape. It would soon engulf the court, the capital, and eventually, the whole kingdom. But Charles remained adrift. He spent long stretches confined to his royal residences. The Hôtel Saint-Paul in Paris became his primary refuge, a palace within the city surrounded by manicured gardens, gilded chambers, and silk-draped silence. Here he wandered slowly, tended by a shrinking circle of trusted aides. On good days he could speak, smile faintly, pet a favorite hunting dog, or hum a familiar tune. On bad days he did not know where he was. or who he had been, or why anyone looked at him with sorrow. At times, he could be glimpsed staring out windows, hands folded tightly as if to keep from falling apart. Servants were instructed to walk softly, to bow but not touch. Dishes were placed near him gently. No sharp objects were left unattended. There were even whispers that he slept standing, fearful of laying down lest he break beneath his own weight. And yet, the world beyond his walls continued. Seasons turned. Battles were fought, alliances formed and fractured. But within these quiet halls, time felt slower, almost still. A life paused in place, a man suspended in a story without end. The kingdom learned to live without its king. Ambassadors came and went without audience. Laws were signed in his name, though he never read them. The people stopped expecting proclamations. Priests spoke of suffering and divine trials. Poets in hushed circles called him Le Roi Fou, the Mad King. But not all had abandoned reverence. Some still believed the king would return, restored by God or by grace, rising from silence like spring from snow. They waited, as people do when they have no choice, waiting, not for a miracle, but perhaps for a moment of clarity, a glimpse of the man beneath the glass. And in those rare moments, he did return. Briefly, a kind word, a memory recalled, a signature on a decree, enough to remind those around him that once, long ago, there was a boy crowned in gold who believed he could bring peace to a war-torn land. And so the days passed, like leaves in a river, carried by currents they could not control. The king remained, not ruling, not retreating, but caught in the still and fragile space between. Outside the walls of Charles's quiet palaces, France was stirring. The trees of the royal gardens still bloomed in spring, their blossoms soft and pink against the stone walls of Paris. But beyond these gardens, beyond the whispering hedgerows and marble fountains, something darker was beginning to take root, not in the soil, but in the hearts of men. For while the king remained withdrawn, fragile, immobile, held in the stillness of his glass delusion, the wheels of ambition turned relentlessly among those who lingered in his shadow. At the heart of the unrest stood two great houses. On one side, Louis, Duke of Orléans, the king's younger brother, charismatic, extravagant, and politically bold. He was a patron of the arts, a man who read poetry and wore velvet robes stitched with golden thread. But his tastes extended beyond music and letters. He harbored aspirations far greater than his title. In the king's absence, Louis stepped boldly into the halls of power, issuing decrees and steering policy in his brother's name. On the other, John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy, the son of Philip the Bold, he inherited not only his father's lands, but also his caution and his fury. John was pragmatic, calculating, and deeply suspicious of Louis. He believed Orléans to be corrupt, indulgent, and dangerously close to the queen. Rumors, like vines, crept through the walls of Paris, whispers of an affair between Queen Isabeau and her brother-in-law Louis, accusations of sorcery, embezzlement, treason. Whether true or invented, they fanned the embers of rivalry into something far more volatile, and the king, once the arbiter of balance, was no longer present to silence the storm. In his place, France fractured. Two factions emerged: the Armagnacs, loyal to Orléans, and the Burgundians, loyal to John the Fearless. What began as political disagreement soon twisted into open hostility. Propaganda was scrawled on parchment and pinned to cathedral doors. Loyalists in both camps gathered arms, and the streets of Paris, once echoing with song and prayer, began to shiver with the sound of steel. Then, in the cold winter of 1407, the first stone fell. Louis of Orléans, returning home from visiting Queen Isabeau, was ambushed in the streets of Paris by masked horsemen. His carriage was surrounded, his guards scattered. He was dragged into the snow and struck with an axe. His skull was split, his fingers severed. His body left broken beneath a silent sky. The city held its breath. Within days, it became known that John the Fearless had ordered the assassination, but he did not deny it. In fact, he justified it, calling it a patriotic act necessary to rid France of corruption. He even commissioned scholars and preachers to support his claims, spinning the killing into something righteous. The court was horrified, but they were also divided. The queen mourned. The king, in his condition, could not respond. The Orléans faction, now led by Louis's son Charles, vowed revenge, and the fragile peace that held the kingdom together began to crumble. By 1410, civil war had fully erupted. Skirmishes spread across the countryside. Entire towns were claimed and reclaimed. Rivers of silver funded rival armies, drawn from taxes levied on already suffering peasants. Food became scarce. Commerce stalled, and the people, always watching, spoke bitterly of a kingdom devouring itself. In the heart of this unraveling, King Charles remained silent. Sometimes he would surface from his illness, clear-eyed and speaking as if from a dream. He would issue orders, sign treaties, speak of unity. But by the time his words reached the parchment, he had often already slipped away again, vanishing into his own unreachable world. He did not attend the funeral of his brother. He did not command justice or offer comfort. He did not stop the war. The glass delusion, once a personal torment, now seemed a haunting metaphor for a monarchy that could no longer hold its shape, a structure too brittle to withstand pressure, a realm that shattered when touched. And so France burned, slowly from within, not with the blaze of open conquest, but with the steady, aching embers of internal decay. Brother against brother, house against house, each side claiming righteousness, each side invoking the king's name. And yet their king wandered still, through halls lined with tapestries, through gardens blooming with roses, through chambers where mirrors were covered to spare him the sight of himself. He no longer governed. He merely endured. The madness that overtook his mind had now overtaken his kingdom. But there was more still to come. Across the Channel, England watched carefully, waiting, preparing, sensing that the cracks in France's crown might soon be wide enough to step through. And in the quiet night, far from the battlefields and bloodied courtyards, the king sat beneath a canopy of stars, still believing that he was made of glass. Autumn falls gently across the fields of northern France. The trees, once green with summer's fullness, now wear rust and gold. Mist lingers low above the meadows, softening the edges of plowed earth and curling hedgerows. The land is quiet, but not at peace. Beneath the soil, old roots twist among the bones of soldiers. Above, clouds pass like slow ships in the sky. It is the year 1415, and into this fragile landscape steps an army from across the sea. Henry V, King of England, has come to reclaim what he believes is his birthright, the French crown. Though the claim is complex, entangled in generations of interwoven dynasties, he carries the confidence of certainty. And more than that, he carries steel. At the same time, France lies splintered. Charles VI, still living, remains king in name, but his mind drifts like smoke through a cracked chamber. His spells of madness now define him. Long absences, sudden violence, endless confusion. He is no longer seen in public, no longer heard in court. He exists mostly in rumor. The kingdom, meanwhile, is a house divided. The civil war between the Armagnacs and the Burgundians continues. Each side still claims to protect the king. Each side still insists it acts in his interest, but in truth, they no longer seek unity, they seek dominance, and while they battle each other, the English approach undisturbed. In October, Henry's army meets the French near the village of Agincourt. The English are tired, ill, and heavily outnumbered. But they are disciplined, and they are led by a man who understands both strategy and theater. He positions his men behind wooden stakes, in a narrow, muddy field flanked by woods. It is a trap disguised as weakness. The French arrive in waves, knights clad in heavy armor, banners fluttering, horses snorting beneath iron helmets. They are confident, certain of victory. But the field is soft. Recent rains have turned the ground to muck, and as the French charge, the earth pulls at their feet. They stumble, they sink, they become crowded and confused. From behind their barricades, the English longbowmen begin to fire. Arrows darken the sky. They whistle through the autumn air like birds of death, striking armor, flesh, and bone. Horses scream, men fall, and still more come. The French press forward, noble blood mixing with mud. It is not a battle, it is a crushing. By the end of the day, thousands of French knights lie dead, including many of the realm's greatest lords. Captured prisoners are executed. The French army, once proud and glittering, is broken, and the kingdom shudders. Agincourt is not merely a military defeat. It is a mirror held to the nation's decay. The divisions at court, the absence of leadership, the internal wars, they all now bear fruit. Bitter fruit. France is vulnerable, open, wounded, and still, Charles remains. He does not attend council meetings. He does not march to war. His mind, still gripped by delusion, is unaware or perhaps uncomprehending of what has occurred. Some say he smiled the week after Agincourt, not knowing what had been lost. And so others must act in his name. Queen Isabeau, once respected but now increasingly blamed, attempts to stabilize the court. She negotiates with both Burgundians and Armagnacs. She tries to keep the English at bay, but trust is scarce, betrayal common. In the years that follow, Paris becomes a city of whispers. Assassinations return. Nobles wear chainmail beneath their robes. At night, the Seine reflects not only the moon, but torchlight from passing patrols. And in the center of it all, Charles' court becomes a hollow pageant. Royal processions occur, but the king is absent. His seal is affixed to decrees he has not read. At times, he believes he is St. George. At other times, he forgets he is alive at all. Those closest to him speak in hushed tones. His servants continue their delicate rituals, removing sharp objects, folding rugs along the corridors, guarding him not from enemies, but from chairs, corners, and sudden movement. The madness has become routine. And outside the palace walls, France falls slowly into two, not simply Burgundy versus Armagnac, not just noble versus noble, but something deeper. A fracture in identity. A war not only for power, but for the soul of the realm itself. Henry V, emboldened by Agincourt, will return, stronger. This time, not just as a claimant, but as a conqueror. And still, Charles sits beneath painted ceilings, listening perhaps to the sound of birds, or to music no one else can hear. A king untouched by battle, untouched by diplomacy, but not untouched by time. His crown still rests above a fragile mind, and the weight of that crown grows heavier, even as the man beneath it begins to vanish. The year is 1420. In the cathedral town of Troyes, beneath vaulted stone arches and stained glass glowing dimly with spring light, a treaty is signed. It is quiet, ceremonial, heavy with meaning. France, still beautiful in its villages and forests, now bears scars not easily seen, splintered loyalties, burned-out farms, missing sons. And here, in the heart of Champagne, something irreversible takes place. a king still living disinherits his own son and names his enemy heir to the throne. This is the Treaty of Troyes. The agreement is elegant in its simplicity, brutal in its consequence. King Charles VI of France, under the regency of his queen, Isabeau, and in the presence of Henry V of England, declares that upon his death, the crown of France shall pass not to his son, the Dauphin Charles, but to Henry and his heirs. In effect, it unites France and England under one rule, at least in theory. But theories are clean. History is not. Let us linger for a moment here, not in the noise of diplomacy, but in its silence. For although his seal adorns the treaty, Charles himself likely did not grasp the depth of what was happening. By now, his mind had become an ocean without a shore. He drifted between delusion and vacancy, sometimes lucid for an hour or a day, only to vanish again into the quiet fog. Witnesses recalled moments of apparent understanding, short flickering windows through which the king's old self appeared, but most of the time he seemed far away. He believed he was made of glass. He still feared breaking. And now, in this fragile state, he had been led, gently or otherwise, to sign away his dynasty. It was a political earthquake. The French crown had never passed outside the bloodline of the Capetians. Yet now, at the stroke of a pen, it was being offered to an English king. Not through conquest alone, but through law and ink and the trembling hands of a broken monarch. Why would such a thing happen? The reasons are many, and none are simple. Queen Isabeau, caught between factional chaos and English pressure, saw little hope in her son, the Dauphin. Rumors accused him of illegitimacy. His court, rebellious and disorganized, operated from the southern city of Bourges. He had refused to reconcile with his mother. And the Armagnac faction that supported him had already clashed bloodily with Burgundians and Parisians alike. Henry V, by contrast, was strong, respected, already in possession of Normandy and much of northern France. His marriage to Catherine, Charles VI's daughter, was part of the treaty itself, a symbol of peace, a bridge between nations, and perhaps for some, a necessary compromise in the face of France's collapse. Yet compromise is not always accepted. The Dauphin Charles, disinherited and humiliated, refused the terms. From the Loire Valley, he denounced the treaty and its supporters. To him, Henry was an invader, not an heir. And so France, already broken by civil war, now became a kingdom of dual kings. One, a young man in exile, the other, a foreign king crowned by ink and politics. And above them both, Charles VI remained, alive but unreachable. He now spent most of his time within the old palaces of Paris. The Hôtel Saint-Paul, the Louvre, the fortified tower of the Temple, all places of half-light and hushed voices. His health faded. His episodes grew longer. At times, he believed he was dead. At others, he spoke of being transformed into animals or of being chased by enemies no one could see. Still, the court moved carefully around him. Servants tended him like monks. Physicians came and went with their tinctures and prayers. No sharp objects were allowed, no loud voices, no sudden movements. He was still king, but more a symbol than a sovereign, a monarch of shadows. Outside, the realm darkened. The English took more ground. Burgundy sided with them. Paris, once loyal to the French crown, now flew the banner of Henry. Only the South held firm, and even there the people struggled to understand who ruled them and who might come next. But within these storm clouds, one strange calm remained. Charles himself. He no longer fought, no longer ordered, no longer resisted. He existed, that was all. Like a figure carved in pale stone, seated in his chair beneath painted ceilings. Wrapped in robes, eyes distant. touched sometimes by a breeze from the open window, sometimes by memory, but mostly by silence. The Treaty of Troy marked not only a shift in borders, but a surrender of continuity, a fracture in the long, slow line of kings. And at the heart of that fracture stood a man who no longer knew the shape of his own thoughts. A king disinheriting a son he barely recognized, a father forgetting the face of France, a body unbroken yet forever fragile. Glass. Still, after all these years. The year is 1422. The leaves are falling again, slow and golden, across the courtyards of Paris. The air carries a chill, not yet the bite of winter, but something softer, like a breath drawn before silence. The city, for all its troubles, still stirs with quiet dignity. Bells ring in cathedral towers, smoke curls from chimneys, life goes on, and in the heart of this ancient city, within the stone walls of the Hotel Saint-Paul, a king is dying. Charles VI of France, Charles the Beloved, Charles the Mad. He has ruled for over 4 decades, or rather, he has held the title. The act of ruling, of leading, of deciding, had long since passed into other hands. First to his uncles, then to his brother, then to the queen, to factions, to enemies, and finally to no one. Now he lies in a chamber lit by low afternoon sun. The windows are covered in linen to soften the light. The air smells faintly of lavender and iron. No doctors crowd around him, no priests chant beside him. Only a handful of loyal attendants remain, moving quietly as they always have, for fear of startling him. For days, the king has eaten little. He speaks even less. His eyes flicker, not with recognition, but with restlessness. In the hours before sleep, he sometimes whispers to the corners of the room, as if conversing with figures no one else can see. Outside, the world has already begun to shift. Henry V of England, named heir to the French throne by treaty, is dead, struck down by illness just weeks before. The crown, he claimed, passes now to his infant son, Henry VI, and with him, the dream of English dominion over France grows uncertain. The Dauphin, Charles, the disinherited son of the Mad King, waits in exile in the south, still unrecognized in Paris, still fighting, still watching. But within the walls of the Hotel Saint-Paul, these events drift like distant echoes. They do not concern the king, not anymore. He has known madness for over 30 years. It has come and gone like tides, stealing memory, returning sorrow. In its early days, it frightened the court. Now, it merely surrounds him like a fog, familiar, even gentle. There is no ceremony for this passing, no armies gathered, no trumpet calls, no last declarations. The end comes quietly, as it always does for the forgotten. A slow dimming of the body, a deepening of breath, a silence that settles over the room and never lifts. On the 21st of October, 1422, Charles VI dies. He is 53 years old. The announcement spreads cautiously. In Paris, the bells toll. In the southern court of the Dauphin, candles are lit. In England, the child Henry VI is now declared King of France. But few celebrate. The lines of succession are tangled, and the war, though quiet for now, remains unresolved. France has lost a king, but in many ways, it had lost him long ago. Charles's legacy is not a simple one. In his youth, he showed promise, hope even. He was once called the Beloved for his gentleness and idealism. But illness changed him, or perhaps it revealed what had always lain beneath. His reign saw the fracturing of a nation, civil war, foreign occupation, a kingdom divided and weakened. And yet it also left behind something strange, something human. For all his madness, Charles VI became a kind of mirror. not of power or greatness, but of fragility. His life reminded those around him that beneath the velvet, beneath the crown, beneath the divine titles, kings are human, vulnerable, breakable, just like the rest of us. He was a man who believed he was made of glass. And in a way, he was. Not just for his delusion, but for the transparency he offered into a mind unraveling before its time. For the way his body endured even as his identity disappeared. For the stillness he brought to a world in motion. In the years that followed, France would fight on. The Dauphin would reclaim his crown. Joan of Arc would emerge. Cities would fall and rise again. But the era of Charles VI would remain suspended in history, an age of shadows and shards. A long chapter defined not by conquest or construction, but by absence. And as time flowed forward, the image remained. Of a lonely king in a quiet chamber, afraid to move, afraid to break. Wrapped in cloth, surrounded by silence, France remembered him not with anger nor even sorrow, but with a kind of hush, as one might remember a dream, too strange to hold, too soft to explain, too fragile to last. An outro, peaceful closing. You've been listening to the story of Charles VI of France, a king who lived in the margins between reason and reverence, between reality and myth. Thank you for joining this quiet journey into the past. Now, let the story settle. Let the images fade. The world is quieter now. Sleep well and dream gently.